An important disclaimer before we get into this conversation around psychedelics. And the following words are borrowed from Tim Ferriss, who I believe does a thorough and responsible job talking about psychedelic use. Here are his words. The plants and compounds mentioned in this podcast are illegal in many countries, and even possession can carry severe criminal penalties. Nothing mentioned in this podcast constitutes medical advice or should be construed as a recommendation to use psychedelics. There are serious legal, psychological, and physical risks. Psychedelics are not for everyone. They can exacerbate certain emotional problems, and there have been, in very rare cases, fatalities. Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
7 years ago, when I was first starting to get curious about psychedelics like ayahuasca, mushrooms, MDMA, and LSD, these medicines were very much underground and difficult to access unless you knew someone who was in the underground world. And I didn't even know anyone personally who'd done any psychedelics to even talk to about their experiences. And at that time, it was also difficult to get access to legitimate resources to educate yourself on the do's, don'ts, and dangers of psychedelic use so that I could even determine whether it was right for me. But these days, psychedelics have become part of mainstream conversation. Tim Ferriss has become a prominent champion of responsible psychedelic use and talks about it regularly on the Tim Ferriss podcast. Michael Pollan wrote a category-breaking book called How to Change Your Mind, which is now a Netflix documentary series. And speaking of documentaries, there's been an explosion of those both on the major streaming platforms as well as on YouTube, featuring all of the different medicines available from ayahuasca to combo, DMT, LSD, mushrooms. There's as much information as you can handle to educate yourself. And now it really seems like everyone is microdosing something these days. So I thought it would be high time to have a conversation about why psychedelics have played such an important role in my personal growth and how you might be able to do the same for yourself if it's the safe and responsible thing that you've decided to do. Now, Brian is sitting out this conversation today because he hasn't really gone as deep into the psychedelic realms as I have. So I've decided to bring back my boy, Keith Bracc, who's a semi-regular on the show by now and a dear brother that I've gone on many journeys with in the psychedelic realms. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the three most important considerations for taking a safe, responsible psychedelic journey. And then considerations that you should make to determine if taking psychedelics are appropriate for you. We'll talk about how 15 minutes of a profound psychedelic experience can impact the next 50 years of your life. How psychedelics have shattered my ego in extremely scary, painful, and then eventually empowering ways. And how a single medicine journey can heal decades of trauma, shame, guilt, PTSD. And finally, how responsible journeying can bring back a sense of wonder, awe, and childhood delight of the world around you into your life. So here we go. A conversation about can psychedelics change your life with Keith Bracc. So in honor of this discussion around psychedelics and their healing and transformational powers, you showed up today on a microdose of LSD, didn't you?
I mean, not appropriate. If there's ever a time, right?
This would be the time. This is your third day, right? You never microdosed LSD before.
Yeah, right. So trying it, and I think the effects have been pretty subtle, which they're supposed to be. It's microdose, but I think it takes a while to you can't judge it for a few weeks. It's got to build up some kind of level of activity in your blood before you can really get the effects. So
yeah. I can't say that I've ever done a true microdosing protocol. Most of the psychedelic experiences that I've had are hero kind of doses of these medicines. And we'll talk about what that means in a few moments inside of a ceremonial setting, right? For a particular reason. But I'm very closely following your microdosing journey because I do want to know what kind of impact it can have over a long period of time.
Yeah, you're not a dabbler. You're like an all-in kind of guy, None of this micro shit. I want to go straight to the macro and times 3.
You get me, man. You get me. That's why I've been so looking forward to having this conversation with you, because we've had over 300 episodes of the podcast here, and we really haven't ventured into this really critical and important area of my own personal development and growth and healing journey, which is this realm of psychedelics. I know I did one episode on ayahuasca for beginners, which I did last year after you and I came back from our trip to Costa Rica, where we went to Soltara after taking a group of military veterans with PTSD down there to work on their healing journey. But that was a solo episode. I just kind of talked about ayahuasca, my experiences. So this is going to be a real cool opportunity for you and I to kind of dig deep on our own experiences around psychedelics, because you have some experience. Brian he's dabbled, and this isn't like his thing, but this is our thing. So it's really cool to have you here, man, and to go deep on this stuff.
Yeah, it's cool to see as we're talking about it. We're on Zoom, so I see you, and I see behind you your couch, which is the location of my first psychedelic experience.
That's right.
So it's just kind of wild to see that and remember that, being on that couch and traveling through space and time.
Oh my God, that's right. So I want to talk about that one, because that was a big one, and it was funny and it was fun and it was illuminating. Before we do that, though, I think it's helpful to just each of us weigh in on the medicines that we've both taken. Before we even go any further, why am I calling psychedelic drugs medicines? Sometimes we like to joke that we're doing drugs, right? Because these are classified as drugs. But when we really talk about them with the respect and integrity and honor that they deserve, they're referred to as medicines, because they hold transformational power to heal old wounds, to break compulsive habits and patterns, to create moments of forgiveness with parents or friends that you've harbored resentment for years or decades. They could be transformational in terms of envisioning, right, futures and creating worlds and lives that you want to live. Really, like when I talk about them from my heart, I talk about them as medicines. And every once in a while, we do like to joke about, Keith's on drugs today, to watch out. I'm curious what medicines you've done.
It changes the context, because a lot of people have experience, quote unquote experience with this stuff, messing around with their buddies at a party or, going to a concert. And that's not the type of psychedelic use we're talking about. So when we talk about it, calling it medicine is more accurate, because it is a controlled setting with a specific intention to go and understand a part of ourselves that has, been blocked before. It's like a can opener to open up to new insight.
Yeah, right on. And by the way, like, I've used some of these medicines in recreational settings back when I was younger, before the inner work days, right? When I was in college, I did MDMA, which we called ecstasy. Now it's Molly, and also did mushrooms. And I can't tell you how different the experiences are when you're using them recreationally to get fucked up and to lose your mind, versus to do it in a ceremonial setting for healing. And in some cases to lose your mind, but in a very different way. Like the mind that keeps you small, or the inner critic, you lose the mind so that you can actually connect with who you really are at a deeper level. If you've tried these drugs or medicines in recreational settings, but you've never done them in ceremonial settings, then you've really never worked with them in the medicinal capacity.
Doesn't count. They're like, no, I've tried mushrooms before. I had a horrible experience. I'm like, dude, you're at a concert. Your friends left you. Like, you had no way home. You're wandering the streets while your subconscious is cracked open. Like, that sounds awful. Yeah. I'm not surprised that didn't go well. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah.
That's right. And actually, one more thing here, because what you just said is really important. The 3 most important factors to using psychedelics in any setting are set, setting, and dosage. Set is, what is the mindset that you're bringing to it? And we're talking about that right now. So if the mindset is recreational, I'm going to get fucked up, going to a party, my friends are leaving me, like that can lead to some incredibly traumatic, wounding experiences. But doing it with the intention of being surrendered to, I'm working on healing my relationship with my father, or connecting again intimately in love with my woman, those kinds of things. That's the set mindset. The setting is what's the physical surroundings and the emotional environment that surrounds it. So when we went down to Soltara, which is an ayahuasca center in Costa Rica, The setting is beautiful, physically speaking. It's in like nature in the jungle. So you're kind of around something that feels almost motherly, like Mother Nature's got its hug on you. And then the big Maloka, which is like this big wood, bamboo crafted, majestic circular space, right?
Grass roofed, like gazebo, I guess is the best word. Yeah.
Right. And incredibly trained shamans, right? Who have worked with the medicines for decades. And one of the guys, his name was Amerigo, spent 5 years in solitude in the jungles, like getting prepared to work with the medicines. So you couldn't be in a more safe setting and environment, right? Like that hug feels really, really safe. And then the third and final component is the dosage, knowing how much to take, because getting that wrong could be the difference between like a euphoric experience or a traumatic one. So setting, dosage. Is there anything that you would add to any of that?
You know, I agree with you completely on the setting. It's like you have to feel safe. You have to feel comfortable. You have to feel taken care of, because you are going to be useless. You know, if anything happens, you got to have something in place where something is going to take care of me in this moment, because you are not going to be able to take care of much at all.
So true.
So for me, that's, even if I do it alone and I don't have someone to take care of me, I have taken care of myself, setting the setting, making sure my phone's off, making sure I have food and water available, make sure everything is taken care of. So while I'm in this space, there's nothing required of me. No one's depending on me in any way. So I can just be in that space. And so I think that's the number one key. You're
making me think of one of the guys in one of our masterminds who did mushrooms on the 4th of July, on the evening of, he failed to take into account. And he did
the war zone that was coming.
Yeah, that's right. And he did a big dose. And so like that entire night, he was freaked the fuck out, and then your night's ruined and you spend the next week trying to recover from that because your system's in a state of fight or flight. Like these are things to be taken seriously, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are the medicines that you've worked with?
Psilocybin mushrooms and ayahuasca. I think that's it. I mean, one of the psilocybin journeys I went on also had some MDMA mixed in with it, but I don't know what that was like on its own. It was just an enhancer. So that's all I've worked with.
Right. And now you're working with LSD, but microdosing it.
Microdose.
Yeah, got it.
And 3 days in, we'll see.
Yeah, got it. So my experience in order of, I would say like frequency, mushrooms, which is kind of my jam. So psilocybin is the active ingredient in mushrooms. Ayahuasca comes second, MDMA, and then LSD I did one time under your supervision. And we both did ketamine at one point, but like it was an experience that we just kind of shoulder shrugged it. So those are the experiences. And
I wouldn't count that as therapeutic. That was recreational.
Agreed.
More. Although it had a little elements of both, but
agreed. More recreational. Like we were at a sound ceremony with a large group of people and there was no real intention, but to have a good time. And it was fun, but I didn't take anything away from that. All right. So, I'm just thinking back as I'm thinking about like 6.5 years ago, I went through a really big transition in my life of leaving a corporate world, 15 years, moving into this new world of becoming an entrepreneur. But in between those two spaces, I decided to do a 90-day radical sabbatical to travel the world. And leading up to my exodus from the corporate space, I'd had this building desire to experience this mystical thing I'd heard of as ayahuasca. It was kind of things that I think I heard Tim Ferriss talking about. And back then, this was 2015 when I was hearing about it. It wasn't nearly as prevalent or as available as it is today. Like you had to know someone who knew someone who was really in to get you involved in that. I'd been kind of banging on doors. No one was home. I couldn't get in anywhere. And one of the things that people said is, listen, who had done ayahuasca? They were like, when you're ready, the medicine will find you. And what was really interesting, man, was when I was leaving for my 90-day radical sabbatical. So I had finished the corporate job. I had about maybe 10 days in New York City before I took off for that trip. I was going to go to Hawaii and I had a connecting flight in Los Angeles. Right before I left, someone sent me hey, I know you've been looking into ayahuasca. There's an ayahuasca thing going on in LA on these dates. And it happened to be like 3 days before my trip to Hawaii. So all I had to do was, bump the first leg of my flight, right? That connecting flight from New York to LA. So I went and did my first ayahuasca experience there. And what was interesting about that experience was I didn't really have a full psychedelic experience. Ayahuasca has been really frustrating for me. I've probably sat in 10 times as many ceremonies as you have. And I've had 1/10 the amount of psychedelic journeys. and what I mean is like, I've had a handful of times where the medicine has really hit me and come through, and I'll share some of the stories that have changed my life. But most of the time when I drink the medicine, I just get really tired and sometimes anxious, and I don't really have a lot that I can process or like come away with very much that is tangible in terms of healing.
Do you meet a lot of other people with similar, or do you think you're unique in that way because of the kind of gut stuff you've been going through?
Yeah, because of Lyme disease and my whole system is scrambled because of that. I'm starting to think that that's probably what was creating some of that like blockage. When we were down in Costa Rica last year, and normally this stuff would be completely sacred. You wouldn't be able to talk about it, but that was documented and, is going to be turned into a documentary. So all this stuff is, public. One of the guys in our group, his name is Brandon. We had him on the podcast. Like his first 2 nights, he didn't feel anything. And that was like a frequent occurrence for him. And then on the 3rd night, he had like a mystical, beautiful breakthrough. Very few people have like what I have, which is I'll sit through 2 nights or all 3 nights and get nothing. Right. But the reason why I want to tell this story is about that first experience. The next day after you do ayahuasca, you sit in a sharing circle and you process what happened the night before. And everyone was going around talking about their mystical experiences. And, one woman was talking about how she met the divine water goddess in her journey. And then this other guy talked about how this chronic pain he'd had in his shoulder that he couldn't quite put a finger on. He saw that it was like this emotional wound from his father. And then it healed and he saw the pain go away. And then he woke up the next day without pain in his shoulder for the first time in years. And as these guys were telling the stories, I sat back with my arms folded and I'm like, you fucking liars. I was so skeptical. I'm like, you liars. Like that can't happen. There's no way. There's this realm of mysticism, stored emotional pain in your body. And like, the ghost of your dad came and swept it away. The divine water goddess. I'm like, and the reason why this is so important to share this part of the story, man, and I'd really be interested in your take is I believe that medicine didn't find me for another year after that. I didn't do anything psychedelic for another year because I wasn't ready to accept that these are portals into some really different places that we cannot understand, that don't have the same kinds of rules. The laws do not apply of regular reality in these spaces. And until I was more humble and more surrendered, I wasn't ready to get the full impact of these medicines.
Yeah, I would go along with the exact same thing. I would just word it differently in the sense that medicine in that experience humbled you. So you were ready and it gave you exactly what you needed, So it wasn't that you weren't ready, what you needed in that moment. And that's, they always talk about you go in with whatever intention you have and then you let that go and the medicine's going to give you not what you want, but what you need. And, Dom Cortuccio, he's a high performer. He's an achiever. He crushes lots of, parts of his life.
But he sucks at ayahuasca.
And then you go into this experience and like looking to come out with, I rode, golden horses through the heavens, and it's like, nope, it humbled you. It did. And I know it had again, in subsequent experiences. So, I mean, that could have been, Mother Ayahuasca at work, giving you the lesson exactly how you needed it. Which is really
interesting because for pointing that out, thank you. Oftentimes we get these messages that we're actually not even ready to hear because we're not listening for it, right? Like I was so arrogant at that time that I wasn't able to witness, or my awareness was so unrefined at that time that I was unable to see the lesson. And the teacher was there, the student wasn't ready. And therefore, like I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and said, I did ayahuasca. When everyone asked me like, yeah, I did it. It's no big deal. A lot of crazy people talking about divine goddesses and these kinds of things. So you just came back from an ayahuasca journey about a week and a half ago. Talk about like the preceding 6 months, man, because you and I have both been in the fucking trenches of our lives in different ways leading up to that ayahuasca experience.
Yeah. Past 6 months has been really rough for me, mostly business stuff, but I have so much of my identity and blood, sweat, and tears invested in my business. And so it's not just like the market wasn't cooperating. This is like, unfortunately, I attach a lot of self-worth and expectations and other things in my business. So when my business is getting crushed, it feels like my soul is getting crushed. And that was my experience over the past, 6 months or so. And I hit depths that I've never hit before. I would say I felt depressed. I don't think I ever have felt depression before. I've felt plenty of fear and anxiety and stress. And I've always had some optimism and hope. Well, if I can just do this, and that, like it'll all be okay. And I go and I fight as hard as I can. But this one felt like I had a foot on my throat and there was no way out. And I felt despair and hopelessness in a way that took it to a place of depression. So it was a really powerful time to experience. And so, after months of that, I'm like, it had been over a year since the last ayahuasca experience we did in Costa Rica. And I was like, I could really use a perspective shift. I need some insight here. There's some gold in here of what I'm going through, and I'm not seeing it. All I see is misery and suffering. And is there any benefit to this? Why the hell am I going through all this? Am I supposed to be doing this differently? Because if I am, clue me in and I'll happily change course. But I couldn't find a way out.
I had no lack of trying. I mean, you and I talked regularly for those 6 months. Me, debilitated with Lyme disease. You, debilitated with this depression. And it's really kind of weird. It's like almost having our cycle synced up. Like we're both going through the shit storm of our lives at the same time, which made it, in a certain respect, really beautiful. Right? Because there were like these moments where I've never seen you depressed in your life, right? In your life, like to a place where nothing I could say could move you emotionally. It was actually a beautiful healing and informing journey for me to realize that just doesn't work in the depressive state, right? Like trying to move someone from a depressive state is actually something that pushes them further because it's like, I can't, and you don't get it, right? And so it allowed me to learn how to relate to you differently and just be like, yeah, bro, let's talk about this. Let's see if anything can work. And if not, let's just laugh a little bit about how miserable this is. And when we're on the other side, how grateful we're going to be about fucking life after having gone through an experience like this.
Yeah. It was so great having you. It really carried me through. And it was really insightful to see, like, to experience. I know if I was on the other side talking to someone who's depressed, I'm like, hey, come on, cheer up. Let's go. Don't worry. It'll all work out. And like, from being in that position, like, that's not helpful. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't land at all. And to your point, like meeting the person where they are and then trying to shift maybe the feeling, with some laughter or something, you got to kind of feel that out. But it really gave me a whole new perspective on how to interact with people who are just so clouded with frustration and misery, that I know I've grown. I want to be able to help people in my life because it's part of my mission. And so being able to do that with more understanding, more empathy,
super
now
skill.
that I've seen it,
definitely
helps tremendously. Yeah. So going to ayahuasca recently, and even just psychedelics in general, I've always been a seeker. I've always tried to understand myself more. I was talking to my mother earlier, I connect to a lot of having low self-love, low value for self, not thinking I'm good enough in various ways. I've never been attached to guilt so much because I try so damn hard to figure it out. I'm making my best decision every time, and I don't have all the answers at all, but I always feel like whatever I did at that moment was the best decision I could have. So I don't connect to guilt a lot. So I'm always just trying to get the answers, to try to understand, and I just get stuck. Why do I keep bumping up against this same problem in my life over and over, And when I became aware of psychedelics, it's like, okay, this gives you some insight. In my experience, what it does is it really moves over the personal mind and gives you access to the true self, that seat of self that has a lot of wisdom. It's kind of like when your buddy is in some shit relationship and you see it clear as day because you're not in it with all his emotions. You're like, that's not the right person for you. We all see it. What are you looking at? And he's just so clouded with his own stories and emotions. He can't see what is just super clear. And psychedelics, seems to move a lot of that personal story, the emotions that cloud the way we see things aside. And you get access to, oh, this is why I've been doing that. And that's really been the attraction for me. I've just been on this journey of just really trying to figure myself out. And I'll give you the highlights of it because I think it's valuable. I think from speaking to a lot of friends, a lot of people can relate, and I'm sure some of your listeners can relate as well, where like in the beginning, I was driven by achievement. I felt like shit. When I had achieved something, it would make me feel better. So I was like, okay, let's achieve. And I went into achiever mode, and I figured if achieving this little bit feels good, achieving a lot's going to fucking feel great. And that's going to be the top of the mountain. And when I make that much money and have that kind of girl who loves me and that kind of a house and that kind of a business and all these things, I'm going to be at the top of the mountain, smooth sailing from there. And one of my favorite lines from Jim Carrey is like, I wish everybody could be rich and famous so they know that's not the answer. So you get all those things and you're like, okay, I still feel like shit. I'm still scared of the same stuff. Before I was scared that I didn't have enough money. Now I'm scared that I'm going to lose the money I have. So, it's like same fear. It's just like a slightly different flavor. It's not any better. So then understanding why these fears come up, why understand, okay, my father treated me this way. I had this in my childhood, figuring all that stuff out. And you can see, oh, this is why I am the way I am because of these experiences. And I thought that would just take care of it once I got that awareness, And then my ayahuasca experience a couple of weeks ago brought me to this beautiful understanding of how I have the capacity to hold the space for all experience, all emotions. It's not about fixing me so I don't feel that way. If something comes up and the fear voice starts talking and says, I'll give an example. Just this morning, I'm in bed. I got one voice saying, get out of bed, go, get to work, do, go. I got another voice saying, I don't want to do shit. I just want to lay here, cause I'm scared to go do all the shit that I got to do. There's a lot of potential failure and risk and rejection. And I got these two voices just barking in my head, and then this third witness voice that I'm just starting to get to know and psychedelics has helped a lot with is just like, what do you want to do here, Keith? And right now, that's what's been alive for me. That witness voice, that self, getting in touch with that. And that's where psychedelics has been huge for me. It gets me to know that guy who has the answers, isn't clouded and can actually live life with some intention and some I want this, so I'm going to do that without getting knocked around by these emotions constantly.
Yeah. I love that picture you paint of these two voices in your head, right? The devil, it's not even a devil and an angel. It's like these two devils of.
Yeah, both devils. Yeah.
And I can see the flip flopping because I've seen times in my life where it's like, I let the fear drive me. Get up, get out of bed, go do the thing. And when I'm in that energy, I end up creating a hell of a lot of work for me because it's like, I need to commit to all these things. And one of those things is going to hit. And that's going to be the thing that makes me feel okay. But what I end up doing is I just end up collapsing under the weight of all of those things. And then there's that other voice that in my mind always ends up getting drowned out. But that one about, stay in bed, I'm scared. I usually beat that guy into submission. But what we're talking about is those two things that are speaking aren't you. Right? Those are just fears that have been formulated over time, a series of experiences, whatever it is. And what you're saying is the psychedelic journeys can kind of create that awareness of now you're looking at your own toxic relationship, right? The example that you gave, with your buddy, you're looking at your own toxic relationship with yourself and saying, I can hear you guys and you're welcome to continue arguing over there in that room, but I've got my own decision to make. And I'm going to go do it this way. That's where your life starts to change. When we talk about freedom, all the freedom that we talk about having as guys, I want financial freedom. So many of our listeners are financial independence guys, which the guys we love, the guys in our masterminds, a third of our guys in our masterminds are financial independence guys because they get the idea, they understand, and they've made financial decisions around their entire lives to say, money and the worry of money is never going to be an issue for me again. So they live with that level of discipline. But what we're really wanting to feel at the deepest level of things is the freedom to feel inner peace, freedom from financial worry is one component of that. But if you still have that, am I enough? What's my purpose in life? Am I actually in love with my partner? What's the barrier to intimacy with my partner? If you're feeling all of that, then you can have all the financial independence you want in the world. You're still miserable in another number of arenas. I'd love to tell maybe a story about my own ayahuasca experience that forever changed my life. And you know the one I'm going to tell about my sister Mary. I'm pretty sure I shared this one on the ayahuasca episode that I did about a year ago, but maybe a number of you guys haven't listened to it yet. This was maybe 5 years ago. I went in with an intention to a 2-day ceremony with the intention of exploring my heart's capacity to love and to be loved. And that was really with the intention of like calling in a romantic partner and understanding like, why have I never really had a long-term relationship beyond a couple of years? How come I've never been in a relationship where I've been all in? How come the idea of marriage feels like a prison cell to me? You know, those kinds of things, to explore that. And in that ceremony, actually it was fascinating. The ceremony, I felt none of the medicine. After the ceremony was over, we're all breaking our fast, we're eating, and everyone's going to sleep. I'm eating these grapes, and I'm disappointed that I got nothing out of the ceremony again. I'm eating the grape, and for some reason that sugar must have like catalyzed the medicine inside of me, because it started coming through me like a freight train. And I went over to the couch and I sat down, and this vision came to me of my sister Mary. I saw her, and then it sucked me into her body and I became Mary. I felt what it feels like to feel my sister's heart and to see the world. Now, for you guys who don't know about my sister Mary, she's the crown jewel of my eye. She's the greatest spiritual teacher I've ever had in my life. She's a special needs, a year and a half older than me, is the happiest, most joyful person on the planet, right? Just like a walking heartbeat of love. So feeling that in my own body and seeing how she saw the world, it was weird. Like I could see people, and instead of seeing people, I saw auras and colors and how she goes and hugs them. And I could feel that. And it happened, like this was happening so quickly, and my heart was cracking open and these emotions were coming through me. My whole body was shaking, convulsing. And then it showed me my relationship with my sister as youngins, where I didn't understand her. Like we couldn't be more different. I'm athletic. She's not. I move 1,000,000 miles a minute. She's deliberate in her pace. I would tear through 15 Christmas presents and be done. She'd be unwrapping her second. She wasn't self-aware, would be sloppy walking down the halls of school. I was hyper-aware, and sensitive. I didn't understand my sister. I loved her, but I was also embarrassed by her. And I didn't take an interest in her for, all of my teenage years and like up until my mid-20s, really. And I could see that. I could feel that. I started crying and sobbing, and the guilt and the shame I felt for not having taken an interest in her, that like overwhelmed me. But then it just showed me my sister Mary, who had no animosity or resentment, total forgiveness. And all she wanted was my attention now and love now. And I'd already kind of been giving that to her in a new way. And it was like, you're all forgiven. And it showed my sister and I growing older together, and my parents passing away, and her and I having like our own relationship without my parents here. It was this beautiful thing. And it was 15 minutes. And when it was done, I had like a puddle of tears in my lap. Like my pants were wet. It looked like I pissed myself. And my whole body, maybe I did, ayahuasca sometimes, and maybe we should talk about that in a minute, like the people's fears. Those are separate stories. but then my body stopped like shaking and convulsing. And that shaking and convulsing is the release of stuck energy, like releasing pain or shame, sadness. And after it was over, my shoulders just came down, and they'd been so tight. I carried so much tension in my body. So much of it had left. And I was almost punch drunk. I didn't really understand what had happened. But in the weeks and months that had followed, not only did my relationship with my sister hit a whole other trajectory, like I understand her at levels that no one else on this planet does. I can speak her language. I can understand her because I felt what it feels like to be her, even just a taste of it. But in the years that followed, my heart, the armor that I'd built around it, slowly started to dissolve, where I could experience intimacy and I could experience emotions. So like a lot of guys talk about those experiences of feeling emotions come up, tears hit the eyes, and then get sucked back down. I was that guy. Now I can cry on things that matter to me. I've been able to let women into my heart. I've had love in my life with women in ways that I never had before. So it was 15 minutes of ayahuasca that changed my life. And it's why I will sit through countless ceremonies where I don't have any mystical experiences, because all it takes is one like that to transform the rest of your life.
Beautiful, dude. What else could you ask for? What blows my mind is, where else can you have an experience like that? Like, let's say you want to understand your sister on a deeper level. You want to understand how to love on a deeper level. You're going to read a book. Like, you're going to spend a lifetime of just experiences and with a ton of intention. And in 15 minutes, your soul felt what it was like to love every human being on this planet to the core of you. Where else is that happening? You know? And then just that experience cracking open and now being a new awareness, a new possibility for what your heart is capable of. It cracked it open and you're left with that. It's magical. I sometimes compare it to, you know, similar to like PTSD, where you can have one moment in life that is so fucking horrible that clouds the way you see the world potentially for the rest of your life if it goes untreated. And you don't have to practice it. You don't have to keep it up. It's not like a gym where you got to keep that muscle strong. It's just boom. Rest of your life, you see through shit goggles that this world is not safe because you had such an intense experience, and then it stays with you as thought afterwards. Psychedelics are similar, but on the other end of the spectrum, where you can have this beautiful, gorgeous, connecting, loving experience that is so beyond the norm that it just blows your heart open, and then you see the world through loving goggles, you know, for the rest of your life, or maybe through clear goggles. I don't know. That could be up for debate, you know, but without the tint that, you know, you had in the past. So it's magic.
It really can be. Psychedelics aren't necessarily for everyone, but the ones where you feel called for it and you do it in the right setting, you prepare for it, it can do exactly what you're talking about. I'll give you one more story. I'll tell this one much more quickly on ayahuasca, and we can move on to maybe some other medicines. But the other really mystical experience, or profound experience, I would call more profound than mystical, that I had with ayahuasca was I was gay. Not like intellectually experiencing what it would be like to be gay. Like I got to experience, the way I got to experience my sister Mary and kind of like being Mary for a period of time, I got to experience being gay. And it was really interesting because I just come off of running a men's retreat, and the shamans, helpers at this ayahuasca retreat were all gay men who I'd gotten a chance to know through previous ceremonies. So it was interesting. I just come off of like really running a retreat where there was a lot of brotherly love. You know what I mean? Like masculine, strong love, guys opening up on emotional levels that we hadn't before. We felt so close and connected. Then there were these men holding space in the ceremony who were gay men, beautiful guys, loving energy. And I think those things kind of triggered this experience of being gay. It went through this whole sexual journey of like everything gay I could do sexually, I did it. And everything gay that could happen to me sexually happened to me, like at the most intense levels. And as it was happening, it was the greatest thing ever. It was like, oh my God, like I get it now. Like I've been missing out. Like, holy shit, this feels phenomenal. And it was this beautiful experience of understanding it. And then bang, it took this dark turn of, but no, Dom, you're gay now. Like this is you now. And then all of a sudden I got terrified around, well, fuck, what does that mean? And telling my friends and my family, and what does that mean with how I feel about myself as a man? Like all of these, like my ego kicked back into place. And I ended up having this like tortuous hour-long experience. It felt like an hour, where I was confronted with this reality of when I come back down, now this is my life as a gay man. I got so shook And I didn't understand until after it was over, when I came fully back down, where I realized, no, I'm not gay. Like the medicine was like, you're not gay. You needed to look at your fear of being gay. You and I have talked about, and a lot of men, like our age, we grew up in the that's gay generation, right? Where everything is, instead of saying, don't be a pussy, don't be like, don't be gay. And I never considered myself to be homophobic. I've always loved people who have expressed their sexuality, who know who they are, who want to be in love. Like I've always loved that. But I recognized after going through this journey that I've always kind of kept that at a distance. There has been that latent homophobic programming in my system based on how I grew up, because that's not what a man does. Once I finally went through that journey and looked at my ego and how scared of it was, I was able to let a lot of that go. And since then, like there have been some wonderful gay men who have entered my life that I've become close and friends with, and guys in our mastermind, and a number of men in our masterminds. And so that was, again, another experience that helped me shatter a layer of my ego that changed me for the rest of my life.
So good. Yeah. Another example of how else could you get an experience like that, because you went through a lifetime of being gay in that hour or whatever it was, it gave you empathy, it gave you understanding, for the beautiful love that it is between gay people, where in our conditioning as childhood, it said something else. And I'm same, like I've always been open and accepting and as liberal as you can get, but I still grew up in New York City in the 80s, and there's still this like conditioning, this underlying energy that took work to overcome. And it's a beautiful way to clear it all out. It sounds like that purged your system of that old shit.
And like you're saying, man, like where could you get that experience? I didn't even know that I needed that experience. Even with coaching, with therapy, like you have to bring those things to your coaches and therapists to work on. But when there's like something completely in your blind spot like this, psychedelics are a great mirror for it.
Yeah. I'll share one of mine. This was a mushroom and MDMA at the same time experience in a contained space, with sound, sound healing, with Reiki work. It was like a really beautiful setting.
And you were the only person. This was a one-on-one.
This was one-on-one with a beautiful man who has become a friend and, was a great guide for this. And I went in with just, why do I have so much like stress all the time? So much anxiety? Why am I so uncomfortable all the time? And I just wanted to clear it out. Like enough of this shit. Can't everything just work out? It's like so when I went in there, I blasted off and I was swept away by the angels, and they took me to the heavens. I'm in the place where all worlds were created, and they're explaining to me why they made Earth and why I'm here and why I chose this life. And I had this like guardian angel walking me through it and just literally just like taking me on a guided tour and answering every question that I have. I always wonder, like, is that whatever she was telling me, is that coming from within, or is that an actual angel? Or I don't know, but does it matter? No. And I remember asking, why does it have to be so hard? Why can't it just be easier? And like one of the answers that I got was, like basketball, for example, like you want the ball to go in the hoop so badly.
Every time you want it in.
Every time you want it in, but it actually went in every time. Would you ever play again? It would be the worst sport ever, So like this struggle and this battle, another thing that came up was, this is the textbook that you're working with. We're here on this planet. You came to this world to learn, to grow, to evolve. That's it. This anxiety that you're dealing with right now is your current textbook. And you don't want to throw that out. There's gold in there. There's growth in there. You becoming the man you've always wanted to be, the highest version of yourself. If you don't understand this, you're not going to get there. Don't be so quick to dismiss it. This is the good stuff. And I remember I'm laying there and I am just bathed in this guardian angel's light and love. And I feel amazing. And I remember saying like, can I always feel this way? And what I meant was this loved. I just felt so accepted and loved. I've never felt being loved to that depth. And I said, when this experience is over, how do I keep this feeling? And she took me on another journey and showed me like, this love is within me, that I can love me, that I've spent most of my life trying to get love, through achievement or from someone else, from a woman, from all these external places. And when you get it, you get that jolt of, but it's not sustaining. And when you don't have it, it's frustrating. And she just showed me how I'm the source of this love and how I can love myself and how at any time I can close my eyes and access this love. It will always be with me. And she showed me times in my life where when I'm following like my passion, when I'm in my zone, how that energy is just amplified, and we went through all these different aspects of my life where it shows up. And after the experience was over, this was, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I guess, 2 years ago, maybe. Still to this day, I could close my eyes and I can just fill myself with that white light and love. Yeah. And it's been super beautiful other than the past 6 months. Like the hardened shell that I've had up, can even deflect that. But I know it's still in there. It's a beautiful thing to have access to. Again, how do you get access to loving yourself to that depth? How do you feel what that's like to even know that that's what it's like so that you can know it's a possibility for the rest of your life?
Yeah, man. I mean, I was there for you when you were going through these experiences, and it was just like, you were so powerful and vibrant, and everyone was like, yo, what's up with Keith? Cause when you go through an experience like this, when you have that access to your own self-love, it's your cup runneth over, right? And everyone gets to feel that. And I know that that's, transitioned into your relationship with your wife and this new house that you ended up buying and moving into, which I know, a big part of it was like she had her eyes set on this place and you guys got it. And Kim is an incredible interior designer that she wasn't doing that stuff before. Like she hadn't let that out because, she was like, okay, I got to be working and doing these things. But like when you started lighting up the world and you got the business thriving and you started leading in your relationship, she was like, well, shit, all that's taken care of. And now when I come to visit your place, you got this great game room that's like beautifully painted blue, and you got the pool table and the shuffleboard. And then in your dining room that's painted green, kind of like, you're in a jungle. And I'm like, damn, I didn't know Kim had that sauce. And that was because she was able to let it out because you were showing up in such a big way. And I think it's really important to talk about like the major life impacts that these kinds of experiences can lead to. And I also think it's really important to talk about how the reason why you had your breakthrough and why like this last ayahuasca journey was so powerful for you, and the reason why my ayahuasca journey was powerful with my sister and the experience about seeing how afraid I was of being gay, those experiences happened because we did the work leading up to it. Contrast that with my first experience where it was really about like, I wanted to do ayahuasca because I thought it'd be cool. I'd be like in that inner circle. And then, I got shown, you're not ready yet, buddy. Like let's humble you and you've got some work before you can cross this threshold.
Yeah. And it's also worth saying there's plenty of experiences where you experience terror. You experience everything in between terror and beauty, the whole spectrum. I mean, you can maybe speak to some of your experiences where you didn't know if you were going to live through. It's not all ponies and unicorns.
Right. Well, we'll maybe transition a little bit here to mushrooms, which is really the medicine that I seem to jive the most with. And during the pandemic, when things got locked down, here in New York City, I'm a single guy. For 10 consecutive weekends, 10 consecutive Saturdays, we're not going anywhere, do anything. I did mushroom ceremonies, and at that point, I'd done enough like psychedelic work where I felt comfortable being able to create the container and the setting for myself. And so I had some profound experiences. One of the experiences, this was really fascinating. Talking about like, what you bring, the mindset, what you bring to the experience has a profound impact on it. I had been getting pretty sensitive to the mushrooms because I've been working with them quite a bit. So I would take like a little bit and I would, go off on a journey. And this one day, I decided to do about 3 grams of mushrooms, which is a healthy dose. A hero dose is like 5 grams. This was 3 grams. I mean, you can blast off on 3 grams. But leading up to that week, or leading up to that day, that entire week, I was stressed out and I was doing all sorts of like my old compulsive behaviors around sex and sexuality. So like I was jerking off every day. Even though my body didn't need it, it was like I was using it as an escape, and my body was exhausted. So I did that like Monday through Friday and on Saturday morning. And then Saturday I went into my journey, 3 grams of mushrooms. And I'm sitting there for an hour and a half, and it felt like I was in quicksand. There was none of the beautiful colors. There was no insights. The music that had moved me to tears the week earlier felt like flat, lifeless, because I was lifeless. And I looked at the plants in my room, which are usually beautiful. You know, you've been on mushrooms. You can, like, nature is like, it's almost like Mother Nature's doing a striptease for you. It's so beautiful, right? My plants looked like they were dying. And what I experienced was the embodiment of impotence. I became impotent. Yeah, great times. Like, and for 5 hours, because that's how long this trip lasted, for 5 hours, I walked around dead to life. And the music sucked. The colors sucked. My body felt drab. And the message was, this is what you do to yourself when you drain yourself of that life force energy. This is how you feel. Like you are no longer magnetic. You are impotent. And from that day, it was actually another beautiful thing, because up to that point, like masturbation had still kind of been like this thing that I struggled with. That day, showing me how lifeless I became, I didn't need to learn another lesson, because in the rest of my life, now I recognize if I do that, then when I walk around the city of New York, I'm not magnetic. When I'm doing podcasts like this, I don't have a full tank. It's a subtle thing that mushrooms was able to dial it up super loud for me. And I don't have to learn that lesson again.
Did you get that lesson while still
Yes.
on it, not afterwards in reflection, which, sometimes the answer comes days later,
It was very clear where it had come from. And I was like, wow. I even knew, like, that week I had a awareness around, I shouldn't be doing this. I even remember the Friday night before where I did it in my apartment, and being like forcing my body to produce like an orgasm, just because like I felt like I needed a release. And after it was over, I was like, oh, can't believe I did that to myself. So I had the awareness, and the next day that journey happened. And while I was going through it, I was just like, got it. Got it. Don't need this. Do not need to learn this lesson. I do never want to feel this way again. Not on a micro level, or definitely not on this intense level.
Right. Yeah. I've had flat experiences, but I haven't had stuck in terror kind of modes, fortunately. But I've seen them enough in the circles where it's a pretty common thing, because, we all have stuff inside of us, and it comes up and you get exposed to it and you confront it, and it can be scary as hell. So there's definitely a disclaimer there. I find, like, for me, I was really curious about psychedelics, but I also had this, like, I don't want to fry my brain. I want to understand myself, but at what expense? What the hell does this shit do to you? And I remember spending a good year just reading books, watching documentaries, listening to podcasts, consuming everything I could, speaking to people who had tried it before, like yourself, before I felt comfortable to give it a try. Fortunately, there's so much good stuff out there. Like, have you watched the new Michael Pollan, You Can Change Your Mind, on Netflix?
Yeah, I'm not all the way through it. I think I've watched 2 episodes, two or three of the episodes. It's great.
That's pretty good. And, just listen to all the experts on podcasts. Like, it's just so good to get a real understanding of the pluses, the minuses. What I liked about Michael Pollan's is they get into the science of it, and then they also talk about the woo-woo. You get a little bit of both, but a little heavier on the science ends of thing, which is the way my brain works, like, don't get too mystical. Like, I like some mystical, but like I want it to like feel real and like something I could put my hands around and understand.
Well, to that point, Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, when you open the cover of the book, there's a picture of 2 brains, one brain in its normal operating state, and then a brain on mushrooms, psilocybin. And when I saw those two pictures juxtaposed to each other, I was like, whoa, now I get the power of psilocybin, because the regular brain, like the one we're using right now, they showed like these different neural connections, like certain parts of the brain communicate with each other on a regular basis, and that presents a certain reality to you of the way the world works. But then when you're on mushrooms, the image of the brain, there's like 10 times or 50 times as many neural connections going to different parts of the brain that never talk to each other. And it creates an entirely new reality. So you see the world so differently, which is why, people who are working on problems, who have been stuck for decades, even in talk therapy, boom, one journey on psychedelics, like they can get through it. Or, healing something, releasing something, like my experience with my sister Mary, just being able to feel something and go into her body and understand. The science of that is your brain becomes a supercomputer in those experiences. So I think you bring in a really good point here, Keith, which is everyone who's come into this journey, and if you're listening to this episode, there's a certain series of considerations that you need to go through to feel comfortable, like going on these journeys. And some people, if Dom and Keith tell me it's good, then I trust that. There's other people who are like, I need to know the science. There are other people who are like, I just want to blast off and have a mystical experience. I don't give a shit about what my brain's doing, You have to just know what your criteria are to decide, and doing the homework necessary to step into the space safely.
Yeah, I think it's almost a good thing how hard it is to find safe places to do this. Like you got to know someone who knows someone, and it's not something you could just Google and go. So it takes some prep, and then it also takes, hopefully, the person who recommends it, you trust, and you trust their experience. And so you have a level of comfort going there, because I'm sure there's a lot of, we're talking about setting and dosage, like getting that right is key. So knowing that you're in good hands is key. This is not something that you play around with. And I wouldn't go trial and error on my own. I would go to some experts first, sit in the place with someone who's done this a million times for many years, knows exactly how to handle all the different scenarios that can come up while you're there, and be there to support you in every way possible. And not only is that important for your experience, but even going into the experience, knowing you're going to be held in that way, and you can really let go and get to some depths that you want to go to.
That's big, man. If you're in the United States, there are ayahuasca facilities in the States that are operating, underground, because it is a medicine that is not legal here in the States. In many places, I actually believe that there's a few spots, certain churches are designated to be able to serve ayahuasca, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's like, it's legally, and I don't know where those are. I think we watched a documentary where there was one in Florida that is above board, but the price tag on something like this, 2 to 3 nights, I imagine you're looking at about $1,200 to $1,500 at a reputable place that's, in the States that's working underground. We went to Soltara, which was in Costa Rica, and I believe that was closer to $5,000 for the week.
Was that the fee that they normally charge, or were we subsidizing some of the veterans that we went with?
That's a good question. I think we were subsidizing because the vets went for free. So it might be $4,000 for the week. It's a week. It's not like, 3 days. And you're staying on a beautiful property, all meals included, all the things. Yeah, man. So this has been really cool to talk about our experiences on psychedelics and what it's brought into our lives. And hopefully for the men who are listening, who are trying to educate themselves on stepping into this kind of work, that they're coming away with some new awarenesses, maybe getting excited about it, or recognizing, hell, that's not for me, which is just as great. And coming away with this idea of, if you're going to do psychedelics, especially if you've never done them before, under the care of proper supervision, because setting, and dosage really matter. I think the final thing that I would want to say, though, is one of the reasons why I love working responsibly with these medicines is it's brought back a sense of wonder and awe into my life. Like that childlike awe and wonder, when you're a kid. And I remember the first time my father brought me into the city and held my hand, took me to, work day. And I looked up at the buildings, the skyscrapers from where I was, and had to crane my neck, and I couldn't even see the top. And it was just like, wow, I couldn't imagine something that big. And going to Disney World, and wow, I felt like I was in a fantasy land. And then as we get older, the wow, the awe, the wonder, it just kind of like goes away. And maybe we feel a little bit of it when we watch a great movie or some cinematic exploration, or we have some great sex that just kind of you taste it for a little bit. But when you can go to these places, other worlds, and have experiences like the ones we talked about today, you're just like, wait a minute, I'm only living in one reality. And it is a very narrow, very, very narrow sliver of all the other realities that exist. And now I have access to these other portals. And I find that when I come back from those experiences, I'm not disenchanted with the mundane. It actually allows me to be far more excited and aware of the beauty and the majesty of everything around me, whether it's the people walking through New York City and all their freakish ways, which I love, or going to the mountains of the Rocky Mountains of Colorado and just being starstruck by the mystical beauty there. These have opened up a second childhood for me. And I love that.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I feel that, but I haven't said that out loud to myself. You know, you go to this ceremony, you're in this beautiful temple,
right,
you're surrounded by people who are all kind of nervous and excited, and they're about to go into this whole new realm, and you're there together, and it's fucking exciting, man. Like, you don't know what you're about. You could be facing terror, you could be facing joy, something's gonna move. Like, you're gonna have a fucking experience, and you have no idea what it's gonna be. And to your point also, you come back, and it's not like, oh shit, I need to just go back there, because that's where the fun is. When I've gotten that perspective of, we are on a rock spinning through infinity, you know, and like, there's some force that brought us here, and like, there's just so much beyond my day-to-day worries, you know, that is so meaningless. And you can just see the vastness and how connected we are, that we're all in this little speck of rock spinning through space together, and come back to the next day into your life with just this new sense of, wow, this is just unbelievable that the trees exist and the clouds exist, and we're living this life in this time, and your mind is so blown open, and you have so much more joy. I've had so much more joy in my day from that experience versus others. I've heard others say, if I went there, I'd probably just only want to keep going back there. And it's like, once in a while it's nice, but the lasting effects are really magical.
I'm with you on that, man. And what is life if it's not magic? And I lived many years where it didn't feel that way. And I'm living my life now where there's magic everywhere. And I can tell you, I wouldn't trade anything. I would not go back for a single day of the way I used to feel. Even as hard as these last 6 months have been with Lyme disease, I can still walk through this experience of like, I know that there's some bigger force that's at work, and I know that I'm learning things on a soul level. I also know that there are going to be some medicine journeys that are coming up that are going to help me see things that I can't quite see from this perspective and vantage point, and I'm excited about that. So, you know, even life's lowest moments, like you just emerged from and I'm still in, thanks for leaving me here, fucker, but I'm on my way out of, aren't so low anymore, because there's even magic to be had here. Just another reminder, the plants and compounds mentioned in this podcast are illegal in many countries, and even possession can carry severe criminal penalties. Nothing discussed in this podcast constitutes medical advice or should be construed as a recommendation to use psychedelics. There are serious legal, psychological, and physical risks. Psychedelics are not for everyone. They can exacerbate certain emotional problems, and there have been, in very rare cases, fatalities. Thank you, Tim Ferriss, for those words. And if you choose to go down the path of using psychedelics, do it safely, do it responsibly, and maybe I'll see you on the path.